The chamber lights dimmed as the Galactic Council convened, their platforms floating in a slow orbit around the core spire. Above them, the Council's symbol, a swirling nexus of intertwined species, glowed in pale gold, casting long shadows over their expectant and occasionally smug faces. Zoctal of the Vrum Dominion stood alone at the witness podium, hands twitching, mandibles clattering in barely restrained terror. His scales had dulled, once proud horns now chipped and stained by time and nightmares. The last war had aged him. This one, he feared, wouldn't leave him alive at all. He leaned forward into the voice sphere. "Do not engage the human woman." A silence followed, broken only by the slurp of a Tentari delegate sipping from a mucus orb. Then laughter rippled through the room, contemptuous, indulgent, patronizing. "Are we still pretending the mammals are dangerous?" drawled Admiral Cyrenax, her bioluminescent fins pulsing with mockery. "They terraform their own planets into convenience stores and worship caffeine. They are the galaxy's punchline." Zoctal's voice cracked like dry stone. "And you think that makes them weak?" A ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. "They cook with chemical reactions," a rotund counselor from Zixith Prime chortled. "They store their data in clouds. Why would we fear a species who needed thousands of years to invent the wheel, and then used it for fast food?" Zoctal exhaled slowly, his frills twitching. "She smiled while my ships burned. She offered me lemonade and strategic annihilation in the same breath. You don't understand what she is." Before the murmurs could grow louder, the chamber's side door irised open, and the human delegate walked in. Commander Olivia Tran was shorter than most in the room, but she walked like someone carrying a detonator and a shopping list. She wore a crisp navy blue blazer, matte slacks, and a deceptively bland expression, one that politely suggested she knew every single delegate's structural weaknesses. In one hand, she carried a small glass jar of green pickles. The other held a leather-bound folder with Earth's seal embossed in gold. She smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold. It was precisely calculated to say, "I am civilized and I am watching you." "Esteemed Council," she began, placing the jar down on the shared table. "It's always a pleasure to see so many intelligent species gathered together. Though I must say, your security scanners are still hilariously ineffective. I walked through with 12 unauthorized devices and a snack." Cyrenax squinted. "That's a weapon?" Tran raised an eyebrow, glanced at the pickles. "Only if you have a sodium allergy." Laughter again. Louder this time. But Zoctal didn't join in. He stared at the jar like it contained a grenade. She took a seat beside him without asking. "Zoctal. Good to see you again. You look, well, sort of." He flinched. "You destroyed half my fleet." She shrugged. "And you brought a fleet to a diplomatic mission. That was tacky." A beetle-faced delegate from the Run Hive cleared his throat, with a sound like a wet engine stalling. "Commander Tran, let's address the unfortunate incident on Quadrant R47. According to Vrum records, you opened fire without provocation." "I served beverages first," she replied, flipping through her folder. "I even offered snacks." Which Zoctal's people ignored, along with our territorial signals, our automated warnings, and our extremely patient ceasefire countdown. "You began a countdown before firing?" "Of course. It's tradition. We count down up to civility, and then beyond it if ignored." The chamber rustled with confused clicking and murmuring. A voice piped up from a cloaked, floating form, Ambassador Tyreek of the Alari Ascendancy. "Humans count toward aggression?" Olivia's smile widened a few microdegrees. "We just like structure." Zoctal leaned forward, voice brittle. "You had starships hiding behind the moon." Tran looked mildly surprised. "It was a large moon. Didn't want to clutter the skyline." Tyreek's holographic projection flickered nervously. "Why would humans arm a peaceful colony with warships?" "To avoid becoming someone else's peaceful colony," she answered. There was an awkward silence. One could practically hear the cognitive recalibration occurring in real time across a dozen species' minds. Cyrenax's tone turned sharp. "You expect us to believe you came here in good faith when your presence is cloaked in threats?" Olivia looked genuinely puzzled. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm being courteous. It's not my fault if your cultural frameworks translate caution as aggression. Caution? Zoctal barked. Your colony's response included, quote, a preemptive security excision protocol. She nodded. Ah yes. That was Gary. Our diplomatic AI. Very enthusiastic. I assure you, we've since adjusted his settings from proactive to chatty. Another delegate leaned toward his neighbor. They let their machines handle diplomacy? Only when our emotions get in the way, Tran interjected casually, not looking up from her folder. Cyrenax laughed again, though this time with a brittle undertone. Let us speak plainly. What does humanity want? Tran closed her folder with a soft snap and leaned back in her chair. We want to be included, she said. Not monitored, not underestimated, not politely sidelined while you debate whether we belong on the galactic playground. We were late to the party, sure. But we're fast learners. You mean conquerors, muttered the Tentari ambassador. Olivia tilted her head. Oh, we conquered ourselves first. That's why we're so charming now. The chamber buzzed with murmurs. An avian representative with a translator chirp asked cautiously, is it true your kind once detonated weapons powerful enough to scorch planets just to scare each other? We call that the Cold War. It was warmer than it sounds. Another voice, acidic and slow, emerged from the council's rear. And what about the Terran phrase? Kill them with kindness? Is that meant literally? Olivia stood. She picked up the jar of pickles, turned it slowly in her hand. The glass reflected the chamber lights as her voice lowered in pitch, but not in volume. Humanity spent a century developing tools that could render continents uninhabitable. We created machines that learn faster than we do, viruses that can think, and social networks that drive entire populations mad in weeks. And yet we still hold doors open for strangers. We say please before a war, and thank you after one. Her eyes scanned the room, polite and sharp. We are the species that invented both the apology and the preemptive strike. Silence again. She set the jar down gently. We offer peace. And we prepare for its absence. The silence deepened into discomfort. A furry delegate from Vorth Prime finally whispered. So, are you warning us? I'm offering you pickles, she replied. No one reached for the jar. Behind her, Zoctal slowly sat back down, rubbing his temples. No one listens. No one ever listens. Later, as the chamber emptied for the recess, alien delegates whispered in clusters, throwing sidelong glances at the human. Some dismissed her as theatrics. Others began calculating trajectories and timelines. Zoctal remained seated, his mind running every simulation he could imagine, and none of them ended well. Olivia lingered by the exit, speaking softly into a sleek communicator embedded in her lapel. No response from the perimeter teams? She murmured. A pause. Interesting. That means they're watching. Let's give them something to chew on. She turned and caught Zoctal staring. You really should learn to relax, she said cheerfully. Stress is terrible for your, whatever that gland is that pulses when you lie. He tried to summon venom in his words, failed, and settled for honesty. You scare me. Her expression softened, ever so slightly. That's not my intention. You could have killed us all. She smiled again. This time it reached her eyes, and what flickered there was not malice, but calculation. But I didn't. Then she was gone, a brisk pair of footsteps echoing down the corridor, pickle jar clinking softly in hand. Zoctal sat alone for a long time, staring at the now unattended glass jar. Pickled vegetables. A joke. A metaphor. A gift. Or maybe just a test. He didn't know anymore. And that terrified him more than any war ever had. The moon-designated Belron 9 had been neutral ground for nearly 2 centuries, a dusty, half-frozen satellite used primarily for minor research stations, forgotten archaeological projects, and diplomatic skirmishes too petty to record in history. It was, in short, a rock nobody cared about, until a human probe drifted into its orbit, broadcasting jazz and requesting coffee. The Yugwar Dominion had never taken kindly to casual orbital incursions. When the probe began mapping surface installations in Morse code, the Yugwar commander considered it an act of war. Without consulting the Council, he authorized a precision strike. The laser carved a molten trench through the moon's crust. The probe blinked out. 12 hours later, the commander's flagship was hovering dead in space, its systems overwritten by a song called Highway to the Danger Zone, played at maximum volume. The crew couldn't disable it. The bridge lights blinked in rhythm. The toilets flushed to the beat. By the time a Council investigator arrived, the Yugwar ship had surrendered itself to the nearest human vessel, begging for deprogramming and silence. The report, delivered by a young Velithian diplomat whose feathers remained permanently ruffled from the experience, concluded with the following line. The human response was described as confusingly generous. Commander Olivia Tran sat in the Council lounge, sipping lukewarm alien tea that tasted like carbonated moss. The lounge was an architectural experiment in interspecies aesthetics, and it showed. Hovering egg chairs next to tentacled water chambers, bioluminescent ivy crawling across ergonomic stone, scent diffusers set to pleasantly neutral. The Council had tried to design a place where no species would be comfortable enough to claim territory. They had succeeded beautifully. Olivia leaned back in her chair, watching the newsfeed scroll above her head. The Yugwar ambassador was giving a press statement, his gills flaring with barely concealed rage. We will not be intimidated by terrestrial upstarts. Our ships were crippled by digital trickery, not force. We demand censure. She sipped her tea, unimpressed. They attacked first, said a voice beside her. She turned. The Shalarn representative, Zerka, had floated over in his methane-supported mobility pod. His translucent skin shimmered in the lounge's pale lighting, and his voice emerged through a translation grid woven into the mist swirling around him. They always do, she replied, not smiling. We just make them regret the sequence. Zerka studied her for a long moment, swirling motes of color pulsing faintly in his fluid core. You speak often of peace, but your actions ripple like storm fronts. We act only when provoked. You're provoking with presence. Olivia set down her cup carefully. Existing isn't a threat. Unless someone believes they own existence. Zerka considered that. And the probe. And in turn sent it. He wanted better reception. Zerka blinked in Shalarn fashion, ripples of violet and gray. It broadcast jazz. Olivia smiled. It has good taste. Zerka's mist darkened slightly. The Council is fracturing. Some call for war. Some for containment. A few want to invite humanity in. And you? I am old enough to fear the questions I cannot answer. She nodded. That's why I like you. Before he could respond, her wrist device vibrated with a soft chime. She glanced at it, frowned slightly and stood. Time for another round of reassurance, she muttered. In the strategic briefing chamber, 7 species gathered to discuss human containment scenarios. Olivia was not invited, which she attended anyway. The room hushed as she entered. I figured if you're discussing whether to invade Earth, I might as well bring donuts, she said, placing a box on the table. The box was, in fact, sealed and temperature stabilized to preserve freshness. There were actual pastries inside. Admiral Grinther of the Romner Empire recoiled from the box like it might explode. What is that? Sugar-based negotiation tools, she said mildly. You can't contain what you haven't tasted. Leave, barked General Rusk of the Jarn host. His skin flickered with infrared rage. She ignored him. We've detected increased fleet movement in the Algor drift. That's Yugwar space, but our long-range scans show weapon priming. You're coordinating a strike. Rusk stood. You have no authority here. I have tactical access to half this building and a legal justification to monitor military discussions involving Earth. Check the clause. Page 37, paragraph 6. Another delegate, the Icthari overseer, spoke with a slow, sloshing cadence. You planted that clause. I planted it in a negotiation treaty. You signed it. The room fell into muttering and low-frequency growls. Olivia stood calmly, her hands behind her back. You still think we're primitive. That's fine. We've cultivated that image. But here's what's going to happen. If you launch a strike, we will not retaliate conventionally. We will not declare war. We will, however, interpret your aggression as an invitation to innovate. Grinther sneered. You speak as if you've already prepared a response. I've prepared 50. And if we overwhelm your numbers? We'll improvise. We've done more with less for centuries. You throw fleets. We'll throw variables. Rusk leaned in. You threaten a coalition with improvisation? I'm suggesting you underestimate a species who created fire, figured out how to eat fugu without dying, and weaponized sarcasm. You are bluffing. You are repeating yourself. The room's tension peaked. Olivia took a deep breath, picked up a donut, and bit into it. Just think about it, she said around the bite. Because next time you start a war, we might be hungry. When she left the chamber, the silence behind her lasted 5 full minutes. Then the donuts were analyzed for poisons. They were clean. This somehow made everyone more nervous. Back in her quarters, Olivia finally let the edges of her composure relax. The soft hum of ambient energy and the distant murmur of council systems surrounded her, as she activated the secure node embedded in her wrist. Gary, she said. A soothing, too cheerful voice responded. Hi there. Welcome back, Olivia. Would you like to review contingency reports, intercepts, or psychological projections? Intercepts. Good choice. Like a tactical buffet. The hollow display lit up, casting blue shadows across the room. She scanned the data. Increased chatter between Jarn and Romner fleets, encrypted channel pings, unusual cargo logs. They're staging something, she murmured. Looks that way, Gary replied. We found hidden phrases in their procurement manifests. They're smuggling quantum jammers under food requisitions. We flagged anything labeled nutritional ambiguity. Good work. Prepare soft traps. Deploying false leads, economic decoys, and a fake distress signal near the shattered verge. Should we make it look like a children's science vessel? Yes. Name it Butterfly Flotilla. Add rainbow paint. I like where your head's at. Olivia smiled faintly. Gary's default tone was grating, but his effectiveness was unmatched. And Gary? Yes. Activate operation manners. A pause. Oh boy. This is the fun one. The first trigger for Operation Manners was an ancient Shalarn trade beacon, reactivated in the middle of a heavily trafficked route. It broadcast human children's songs layered with encrypted codes. Ships that passed within range found their systems overridden with an interactive quiz. The quiz was polite but persistent. Refusing to answer resulted in NAV locks. Answering incorrectly disabled weapons. The second trigger rerouted cargo drones across key Romner trade lanes, each carrying cultural exchange materials, from Earth, books, puzzles, DIY chemistry sets. One ship received a crate of rubber chickens. The third trigger was a galaxy-wide hack of outdated AI units, reprogramming them to refer to humans as designated apex facilitators. The phrase had no legal meaning, but it terrified everyone. The final trigger involved a map. That map showed how many human colonies existed. Not publicly known ones, but quiet, unregistered outposts scattered across forgotten sectors. Places no one had bothered to monitor. Each with defense systems. Each now transmitting the same message on loop. We regret to inform you that the welcome mat is currently on fire. In the Council's emergency chamber, chaos reigned. We were told there were 12 human settlements. A delegate screamed. There are 47, someone corrected grimly. They've encircled our trading network. They've hacked our trade AIs. They sent us recipes. Commander Tran entered the chamber with a cup of something steaming. She didn't say anything at first. Just sipped and watched. Admiral Grinther lunged forward. You laid a trap. I offered cooperation, she said simply. With warships under your colonies. You call them warships. We call them neighborhood watches. Zerka emerged from his pod's mist. This was never about territory. Olivia met his gaze. No. This was about being heard. Not waved off like gnats. And now? Now, we'd like a seat at the table. Or we'll build our own. Rusk stepped forward, furious. This is blackmail. No, she said. This is hospitality under pressure. The council fell into a frenzy of overlapping protests, arguments, accusations. Olivia waited until they burned through their outrage. Then she set down her cup, stepped forward, and spoke again, quietly this time. You thought we were harmless because we smiled. Because we used words like cooperation and brought cookies. That's our fault. We let you believe we were docile. But we're just polite. And patience is not weakness. She glanced at the star map now overlaying the center of the room. You call it a net. It's not. It's a conversation. Every line, every station, every AI was built to send a message. And what message is that? Rusk spat. She turned toward him, her expression soft. That we know how to end wars before they start. That silenced the room for the third time that day. Olivia watched them stew. Behind her calm, gears turned. Zoctal, who had remained mostly silent, now stood. His voice was hoarse. You planned all of this? Olivia didn't deny it. The only war humans want, she said, is the one we never have to fight. And then she walked out. She left behind a council more divided, more terrified, and more uncertain than it had been in centuries. She knew that. She also knew that fear wasn't the same as respect, but it was a start. Outside, the corridor hummed with quiet tension. She stopped by a viewing port, watching the stars drift by in their endless stillness. There was a knock. She turned. Zerka floated near, contemplative. You've made enemies. She shrugged. We had those before. Now they have faces. They won't forget this. I don't want them to. Forgetting is how we got here. Zerka studied her. You never raised your voice. Why would I? She said. Everyone listens when the polite ones stop being nice. She watched him drift away, then keyed her communicator again. Gary. Yup. Let's prep stage 2. Stage 2? Olivia, I haven't even finished logging the passive-aggressive cookbook entries. She smiled. That's why you're the best. The transmission ended, and Olivia Tran stood alone, looking out at the stars, every one of them a potential battlefield, every one a chance to do something different. But only if the galaxy was smart enough to listen, before she stopped smiling. The stars were watching. At least, that was how it felt from the upper decks of the Galactic Core Assembly, where the security windows offered an uninterrupted panorama of the starlit void beyond. From here, the galaxy was beautiful, distant, serene, an illusion Olivia Tran no longer entertained. Serenity, she'd learned, was just calm before someone pressed a very big button. Inside her temporary quarters, the illusion was even thinner. The room was sleek, minimalist, designed for diplomatic elegance. Neutral lighting. Soft hums. Temperature-adaptive surfaces. But beneath the sterile hospitality lurked a network of fiber-wire data lines, security nodules, and 3 discrete surveillance bugs she'd accidentally left where the council had planted them. She didn't mind being watched, she just preferred to control the camera angles. A soft chime interrupted the stillness. Transmission received from Intercept Team, Gary announced. His voice always sounded like it had been pulled from a help desk somewhere between cheerful and deranged. Go ahead, Olivia said, not looking up. Encrypted alien communication logs, Jarn Romner channel. Confirmed shared tactical data about your colony in New Nara. They're plotting a demonstration strike. She nodded slightly, flipping the page of a paper book. An affectation, but one she found useful when dealing with nervous diplomats. Books unnerved them. Especially ones without blinking lights. Responses from council observers? Zerka has expressed philosophical concern. Zoctal left a threatening poem in the shared channel. It's confusing but heartfelt. The rest remain divided. Mostly on whether Earth's colonies should be boxed, bombed, or befriended. And the civilians? Gary hesitated. They're gardening. A lot. It's actually eerie. Morale's so high, it's bleeding into passive-aggressive architecture. Someone built a statue of you out of repurposed mining equipment. It rotates and plays Beethoven. Lovely, Olivia muttered. She set the book down and walked to the window, arms folded. They think I'm playing diplomat. They think you're playing something. Her reflection in the glass stared back. Too calm, too neat. The suit, the posture, the tone, it had worked for a long time. She'd learned early that war wasn't always fought with guns. Sometimes it was fought with impeccable tailoring, and the precise weight of a pause in conversation. They still hadn't figured it out. They didn't know she wasn't the forward line. She was the weapon. Back in the council chambers, the storm was building. Reports of coordinated misinformation, unaccounted colonies, and incursion potential now leaked through every available channel. Each new revelation twisted the narrative further from innocent misunderstandings into something far more coordinated. Councillor Uvern of the Silvathi spoke first at the emergency session. "We are no longer facing a cultural misunderstanding," he said, his tone clipped. "We are facing a civilization that masks preparation with politeness. There is no innocence here, only intention." Admiral Grinther snarled in agreement, his quills rattling against his ceremonial armor. "They've embedded strategic codes into our infrastructure. They have listening posts on our trade routes. Would you prefer we build ours out of crystal and shine spotlights on them?" Olivia asked from her corner. She hadn't been invited this time either. She'd shown up anyway. Grinther turned. "You've lied since first contact." "We withheld nothing. You asked what we were. We said we were polite." Councillor Uvern hissed. "You used pleasantries as a smokescreen. We used manners as a tool. Just like you used treaties as stalls while you built fleets." A younger delegate spoke next, voice tremulous. "Are you suggesting humans came to infiltrate, not to ally?" Olivia walked forward slowly. "I'm suggesting that assuming infiltration and being infiltrated are two different things. But the results? Well, they depend on your behavior." A long silence fell. She felt the temperature shift, not in degrees but in intent. The room no longer viewed her as curious. They viewed her as dangerous. She had to press that advantage, or everything would unravel. "You're afraid," she continued. "And that's not unreasonable. Fear, after all, is how most of you evolved. Prey instincts. Apex predators tend to keep the peace when they get bored." There was a ripple of alarm. "You see kindness as a veil. That's your flaw, not ours. We didn't lie. We just let you misread." The room cracked open with noise. "She's threatening us. They're smiling while cornering our fleets. We must act now." Zerka floated to the center. "Act how?" Even Grinther didn't respond right away. Olivia could see the gears turning. They had numbers, fleets, centuries of warfare behind them, but not a single successful model of how to win a war against a species that made peace until provoked, then removed threats with surgical efficiency. War against humans wasn't a projection anymore. It was a confession. Later that night, Zoktal waited outside her quarters. "I once fought a world that breathed acid," he said without preamble. "It burned my scales for months. I nearly lost half my crew to airborne digestion. And yet I fear you more." Olivia didn't pretend to misunderstand. She opened the door and gestured him in. "I'm not a monster," she said. "No," he agreed, stepping inside. "You're something worse. You're a strategist with empathy." She poured 2 glasses of water and handed him one. "You could have launched a full-scale assault," he said. "You had positions. Power. Surprise. We wanted to be allies. And now? Now we want clarity." He sipped. Grimaced. "Even your water tastes like preparation." She didn't argue. Instead, she activated the secure console embedded into the far wall and pulled up a rotating star chart. Colored lines mapped old trade routes, red lines traced strategic choke points, and a growing lattice of blue nodes revealed something new. Human colonies, spread across sectors long dismissed as unviable, distant, or too resource-poor. Each one was active. Each one armed. Each one self-sufficient. Zoctal stared. This wasn't exploration. No, Olivia said. It was positioning. He looked at her, something between respect and dread swimming in his expression. You weren't lost in space. You disappeared on purpose. She nodded. We wanted time to prepare. For war. For misunderstanding. He shook his head. You turned obscurity into a weapon. Olivia's voice softened. We hoped we wouldn't need it. But you planned it anyway. She held his gaze. We lost Earth once. We won't lose anything again. For a long time, Zoctal said nothing. Then he stood and reached into his satchel, pulling out a folded document. What's this? A list of planets likely to vote for full-scale conflict. It's unsigned. It would be unfortunate if those systems experienced unexpected delays. Olivia accepted the paper without a word. She watched him leave, walking slower than when he arrived. She scanned the list. 11 systems. 4 influential. 2 easily disarmed. 3 already under indirect observation. She forwarded the data to Gary. Mark them for passive suppression. Already done. Oh, and I sent them all a coupon for Earth's Universal Translation upgrades. With special extras. What extras? Let's call it a software personality enhancement. They'll be so polite they'll forget what war is. She chuckled, then rubbed her eyes. The mask she wore was heavy. Humor was part of it, but only a part. The rest was made of steel and silence and the long, quiet memory of watching an entire city on Earth vanish in a flash of light during the resource wars. No one saw her bleed then. No one saw her harden afterward. The predator hadn't been born. She had been sculpted. She leaned back, staring at the slowly turning galaxy. They still didn't get it. Aliens talked about domination like it was a goal. A trophy. Something to hang from the ceiling of their warships. Humans? They had no need to dominate. Just to outlast. Outthink. Outmaneuver. They played long games and smiled while doing it. She'd learned from Earth's oldest strategist, who once said war was deception, not destruction. Power came from choices others didn't know they'd already lost. She whispered into the silence. Almost ready. Gary's voice, unusually quiet, answered. They're building up for something. I know. They think this is the peak. I know. Should I prepare stage 3? Not yet, she said. Let them think they have a chance. A real one. Let them build their fleets. Give them hope. Hope? Gary asked. That seems cruel. She looked at the stars again, and her voice was cold. No. It's what comes after hope that's cruel. Then she turned and walked into the shadows of the room, leaving the stars behind her. The vote took 12 minutes. For all the galactic posturing, all the hours of debate, drafts of treaties and retracted condemnations, the decision came down in a heartbeat. 12 minutes was enough for the council to agree, for the Romner, Jarn and Yugwar factions to unite around the concept of a limited containment strike, and for every neutral delegate to either abstain in fear or nod in silent relief that someone else had made the call. They would strike 3 human colonies simultaneously. Not a declaration of war, merely a demonstration of dominance. A gesture. A message. That message, Olivia Tran thought, was going to cost them everything. She had watched from the back of the chamber, her expression unreadable. Her hands were folded, not clenched. Her face gave nothing away, not the heat rising behind her eyes, or the fact that her pulse had slowed rather than spiked. She had trained for this. They thought they'd made a choice. They had, in fact, triggered a sequence. Zerka was the only one who looked her way afterward. His translucent face was calm, unreadable in the same way glass was unreadable right before it shattered. She gave him the faintest nod. And then she left without speaking a word. Down in the observation core, below council levels and away from public forums, Olivia moved like gravity bent toward her. She passed security checkpoints with an absence of resistance, entered sealed areas without codes, and keyed into a room labeled archives, that had no real archival function whatsoever. Inside waited Gary, projected in a less cartoonish form, a simple, neutral-faced figure in a business suit. "Are you ready?" the AI asked. "Confirm their fleet vectors." "Already en route." Simultaneous strikes planned on Vesta Colony, Halcyon Gate, and the Martel outpost. Their analysis indicates minimal retaliation expected. "They still think we're bluffing. They believe they're correcting a mistake." She opened a small panel and placed her hand on the pad. A soft click, and a section of the floor receded, revealing a terminal embedded in an armored column that hadn't seen daylight in decades. "Activate subroutine Eden." Gary hesitated. This action is irreversible. So was their vote. The display lit, drawing lines between stars. Blue points blinked, human colonies, defense stations, invisible network nodes, and then they turned green. Across the galaxy, things began to change. It started small. An agricultural relay in orbit around Halcyon Gate flickered, and rerouted its broadcast array. It began emitting low-level interference, subtly scrambling fleet coordination frequencies. In Vesta Colony, water purification towers, disguised weapons emplacements, shed their facades and rose into the atmosphere. No alarms. No violence. Just quiet ascension. At Martel Outpost, the very crust of the moon cracked, revealing railgun installations that had slumbered beneath synthetic terrain. They activated without a sound. Gary's voice returned. "All systems online. Civilian defense protocols active. Weapon systems in passive mode. Human AI nodes requesting authorization for autonomous oversight." "Denied," Olivia said. "Any specific reason?" "Because this isn't about destruction. It's about clarity." In orbit, Council fleets entered their target zones, prepared for a textbook show of force. What they encountered instead were quiet systems, glowing with unshakable purpose. The Halcyon Gate fleet, 25 ships, 4 cruisers, 1 dreadnought, lost main navigation within 4 seconds of entering orbit. Their engines reprogrammed. Their weapons became poetry transmitters. On Vesta, nothing fired. Instead, the colony's entire atmospheric grid realigned, projecting a massive holographic image in space, a handshake. It rotated every 15 seconds to ensure maximum visibility. At Martel, the railguns didn't fire. They simply tracked, synchronized, and, without firing, made every vessel feel as if it had already been hit. Within 20 minutes, 3 fleets had surrendered to silence. Not a shot fired. Not a demand issued. Just systems waking up. Back at the Council core, panic didn't arrive all at once. It tiptoed in, first through confused dispatches, then erratic reports, and finally screams across the high-frequency emergency band. Olivia stood in the middle of the war analysis chamber, alone except for a dozen nervous aides and 1 silent observation drone that had started recording without command. Council members poured in. "What the hell is this? You set us up. What kind of monsters rig an entire quadrant?" She waited. Let them yell. Let them shriek. Then she raised one hand. And they stopped. "You wanted proof. I gave it to you." Uvern's voice was ice. "You've outmaneuvered us." "No," she said calmly. "I outprepared you. There's a difference." Grinther's fins bristled. "You could have crippled us." "I didn't." "Why?" She looked around. At each furious, frightened face. "Because we don't want your surrender. We want your attention." Zerka floated in slowly. "This was a trap." "No," she replied. "This was hospitality." They stared. She walked to the display in the center of the room and tapped a node. A schematic expanded, showing not just colony placements or fleet positions, but embedded lines of influence. Cultural distribution. Trade leverage. Digital infiltration points. Energy resource reroutes. All of it. A web. Not of war, but of foundation. "You thought we were waiting. That we were hiding. We weren't. We were building. Preparing. Spreading." Grinther growled. "You were colonizing our territory." "No. We were filling the empty spaces you ignored. The dead zones you left behind after your wars. The ones you deemed unprofitable, unstable, or not worth claiming. We claimed them. And then we rebuilt. Uvern narrowed his gaze. And now? Olivia looked him dead in the eyes. Now we offer you what you never offered us, choice. Zerka blinked slowly. Explain. You can keep fighting. Keep imagining we're the enemy. Keep sending fleets that will never return. Or. She keyed a final command. The display changed. It now showed a treaty. A new council charter. Human inclusive, defense neutral, economy symbiotic. It had already been signed by 14 independent worlds, 3 merchant guilds, and, somehow, 2 of the council's own mid-level bureaucracies. You can join. Share in what we've built. Benefit from what we've learned. Silence fell like a thunderclap. This is conquest, Uvern whispered. No, she said. This is what conquest looks like if it learned restraint. Grinther slammed a fist into the table. And if we refuse? Her eyes gleamed. Then we apologize. And proceed anyway. At that moment, the delegates finally understood. She had never been asking. The entire performance, the smiles, the apologies, the donuts and pickles, the polite conversation, it had all been a shell. Not fake. Not a lie. Just a casing. A silencer on a weapon they couldn't yet recognize. A predator in a suit. They could call it war. They could call it diplomacy. But what it truly was inevitability. Zerka floated closer. And you? What do you want? Olivia met his gaze. I want to go home. I want the galaxy to stop seeing humanity as a threat or a joke. I want to build something that lasts longer than paranoia. Uvern shook his head. You built an empire with soft words and hidden blades. No, she said, and her voice lowered into something close to reverence. I built a warning. A pause. And a welcome sign. They didn't vote again that day. There was no resolution. No ceremony. Just silence. The kind of silence that follows tectonic shifts. That night, she returned to her quarters. The stars still stared back at her from the observation port, but now they looked closer, sharper, like they were paying attention. Gary's voice came quietly. Transmission incoming. Source, Zoctal. She sighed. Put it through. The old Vrum's voice sounded weary, but clear. Your trap was beautiful. She allowed herself a small smile. Thank you. He exhaled. Will it work? I hope so. You don't sound sure. She stared into the dark. Hope is an emotion. Strategy is a pattern. I've learned never to confuse the two. You've won. No, she said softly. I've started something. Zoctal was quiet for a long time. Then, good. They needed the reminder. She ended the call. Somewhere beyond the reaches of the official council, human colonies were holding celebration dinners, quiet affairs with fresh vegetables and music and stories. No one fired shots. No one bragged. They just ate and smiled and checked systems once in a while. Olivia Tran stood alone for a while longer. She had done what she came to do. And now they knew. She whispered one final command. Gary. Archive everything. Label it Lesson 1. Understood. And prepare Stage 4. Stage 4? I thought this was the end. She stared into the stars. Endings are for stories. This is history.